Alright. Unless you've been under a rock for the past 24 hours or so, you've probably seen the latest developer radio from the HSR team. Though just in case you haven't, I'll have the relevant parts up on screen here, as well as linked down below in the description if you want to read it for yourself. I wanted to sleep on it before giving my full personal thoughts, which is why this video is coming out now, so with that bit of formality out of the way, let's talk about it. I want to start by talking about the section closer to the end of the dev notes first, where they say the following. Issues close to Trailblazers' hearts, including difficulty deploying old characters on the battlefield and the strengthening of these old characters, are already on schedule. First, I have to say, aw, you shouldn't have. Looking after my heart is so kind of you. But in seriousness, I also have to say that this is potentially pretty huge. Like, they do say they're directly looking at strengthening older characters, which for Hoyo is mostly unprecedented. This is stuff I've been advocating for in a lot of my videos, even going all the way back to my very first one. I've talked about why characters being bad is a problem due to people not being able to play the favorites they rolled for. I've talked about why characters need to be buffed as a result of that, and also how they can do it through a variety of ways such as items, strengthening quests, trace tree, and level cap expansions, among other things. I've even talked about why it's important for us as players to call these things out, because at the end of the day, it's us as consumers and players that are feeling the pain points of the issues that power creep causes. And finally, after months upon months, we're starting to see some changes, or at least an announcement of them. I definitely do have some misgivings about this, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but I do want to say for now that I have some preliminary optimism and honestly, quite a bit of excitement. Like, it's actually kind of crazy that after all this time, we're finally seeing something from Hoyo, and I have to say it's about time as well. It goes to show that companies like Hoyo aren't infallible despite what the Hoyo shills want you to think. They can make mistakes, and power creep is definitely one of them. Whether you look at power creep as a result of HP inflation or just the simplicity of the game or whatever else, at the end of the day this was something caused by Hoyo, and it's also something they need to fix. There's a lot of ways this fix can be done right, so at the very least I think it's worth giving Hoyo a chance to right the wrongs here. Something I was seeing on Reddit is that they actually may have already hinted that they're working on this system during the 3.0 story where we got to play as the Stellaron Hunters. In that section, you get Silverwolf as a support unit, like Dan Hang in the Fantilia fight or Black Swan in the Nightmare fight, and Silverwolf had her single target ult replaced with an AoE attack. It definitely could have just been something for that section, but personally I'm leaning more towards it being a hint as to what's coming. This actually gives me a bit of hope, because the lazy way to do character upgrades would be by simply buffing multipliers or just adding basic stats, but if they're actually willing to commit to updating older kits with new mechanics, or even just expanded mechanics like turning a single target ability into AoE, then that goes to show they're willing to put in some more effort and hopefully fix these things properly. Like, there are some kits that simply can't be fixed with a multiplier change because there are some fundamental flaws or demerits in them. We have a character like Yukong that has her buff expire on ally turns instead of her own, meaning it falls off super quickly. We have Yanqing who struggles to keep uptime on his talent buff, which hurts his personal damage. We have Himiko that can't overcap on stacks for her follow-up mechanism, meaning she wastes stacks half the time and gets less follow-ups as a result. Almost every character pre 2.x has at least one huge flaw in their kit, and even some characters post 2.x have them too, or simply got pushed out of their niche like Sparkle when Sunday released. At the very least, even if they don't actually buff characters, I do think there's a lot of space for them to fix characters, and that alone can help. Personally, I'd hope both happen, but after all, this is Hoyo. We definitely need to temper expectations a little bit here. Like, imagine if Himiko not only got the ability to overcap on her follow-up stacks, but she also got a small amount of super break scaling on that follow-up to cement her more into that super break niche, rather than how it is now where she's just okay at being both a super break DPS and a crit DPS. Imagine if Yukong not only got her buff changed to tick down on her turn, but they doubled down on her being a sub DPS by giving her some way to ult more often, as that's where the brunt of her damage comes from. There's tons and tons of ways that they can not only fix problems, but also give characters niches that they excel at, which further promotes actually using those characters long term. Giving characters niches means they will always have a purpose, and right now there's a lot of characters that simply don't have one. So this could be a good step in the right direction of making our older units better long term. Just as a fun thought experiment real quick, I did actually make a tier list of characters I feel need a buff, and I'll leave that on screen here for a few seconds. Feel free to pause if you want to give it a more in-depth look. This wasn't too serious, and I literally did it in less than 5 minutes, but I'd also love to hear your thoughts on who you'd like to see buffed down in the comments below. I do want to be clear before moving on that I am definitely not saying I'm fully on board the Hoyo shield train now. While I'm 100% excited for the possibilities that this could all bring, I think it's better to tame expectations here. Like, they've actually buffed characters in their other games too. Zhongli got buffed back in Genshin's early lifetime, and in Honkai Impact 3rd they had a system called Augment Cores that made older characters stronger in that game. But not only have they never buffed anyone since in Genshin, they also completely abandoned the augment core system in Honkai 3rd. So if we're being realistic, who's to say they won't do the same here? Also, let's be honest for a moment here, there's basically no way they'd be going out of the way to do something like this if their bottom line wasn't hurting, and to that I say good. If you put out a product that people are unhappy with or don't buy into, then you should feel your bottom line hurting. Like, it seems like people actually spoke up here, be it with their voice or their wallet, and that's only ever going to be a good thing if we want to see change like this. Going forward, I really do hope we can all take something from this, and it's that we all actually have a voice here. It doesn't matter how good or bad something is, you should always give your opinion on it one way or another, because even if it doesn't seem like they're listening enough, there will always be sometimes that they do, and this is one of those cases. If stuff is going good with the game, then praise them so they do more of it. If stuff is bad, then let them know so we can get changes like this and the game can improve. With that said, I do want to talk about another part of the developer radio here, and that's the story sections, which I do actually have quite a few misgivings about. The summary of those two text blocks, to my understanding, was that they'll just be making a lot of lore optional to read and some puzzles as well, for example allowing you to just enter combat instead of solving the sword puzzle at the end of the Amphoria story. If I am understanding the changes correctly, honestly, I feel Hoyo kinda missed the mark here. While yes, the amount of puzzles were tedious and the black screen white text was bad, I don't think the actual bulk of what we read and the lore of the world was the problem, nor were the puzzles themselves. Instead, I think the actual problem was definitely more related to the presentation and how the story was told, as well as the bloat that was surrounding the story. I'm just not sure if removing things was the answer here. In my opinion, what they really needed to do was just make the story more concise, as well as lessen the amount of things we had to do that disrupted the flow of story. Like, if we had one puzzle room instead of 3 in a row, it would have been a lot more palatable. Combo that with removing the black screens, having more tight dialogue, and our characters having more than 3 animations, and honestly, I feel like it would have been a pretty good experience. This is why I kind of feel they missed the mark. They're solving an issue of the lore being the problem when, at least in my experience, that wasn't a problem nor what people were really asking to be changed. I do really hope that it doesn't affect the story going forward in a way where it makes it feel dumbed down, because the last thing we need is another game with a super simplistic story, for example like what we got in Genshin with Natlan. All this said, in my opinion, they're pretty vague in general, both in the story and the power creep sections. It's definitely a bit hard to gauge how all this will play out because frankly, as I said earlier, this is pretty unprecedented for Hoyo. Will they properly do the story so that they only remove the bloat instead of removing important stuff like the lore? Will they actually make meaningful buffs to characters rather than doing the bare minimum to make them playable? Will they follow up on buffs throughout the game's lifespan, meaning a character like Blade could get buffed tomorrow and then again a year from now? Or is this just a temporary thing that will be abandoned like the augment cores in Honkai 3rd were? Really, only time will tell, but I have to say that I'm at least a little bit hopeful that they can do right by their game and more importantly by the community playing it. I'm definitely cautiously optimistic right now, but I'd rather feel this way than feel the same annoyance I have about these topics for a while. Hoyo has talked the talk and now they just need to walk the walk. We'll have to see how it goes in the future, and in the meantime, I've got to say that we should just enjoy this for what it seems to be. A W for the community, and a W for the game too. Anyway, that's my rant. As always, thank you very much for watching. Subscribe, join my Discord link down below, find a place to hang out and chat, and if you haven't already, maybe give my other videos a shot too.